This is a fan-generated show. If you would like to support us, please go to jamieglazov.com, and also don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. All your support is greatly appreciated.
Good evening, and welcome to another Daniel Greenfield moment on the Glazov Gang. Today, we're going to talk about inspiration. Inspiration is just a quality that is really hard to pin down. As a writer, I often seek for inspiration. I seek for it high. I seek for it low. What inspires you? We know what inspires the New York Times, or at least Vivian Gornick, writing at the New York Times. The title of her now infamous piece is When Communism Inspired Americans. Are you inspired by communism? Well, a whole lot of the left is. That's the dirty little secret behind articles like When Communism Inspired Americans. It's the dirty secret behind the left's current violent May Day protests that smash store windows in Portland and other fun little enclaves of the left, including places where people ran around marching with red flags and smashing police cars or waving little Soviet flags at protests. Of course, in the Soviet Union, you could just wave little Soviet flags, but you couldn't actually smash anything, or you would get shot or go to a cozy little gulag. You know, arguably Portland is a bit of a cozy little gulag too, but it's a cozy little gulag with a whole lot of fair trade organic coffee shops. It's a very nice gulag. But the left, or as they now want to call themselves, the resistance, is very inspired by communism. The left has always been inspired by communism. Because what is communism really? It's the logic of the left that the state should control absolutely everything, taken to its horrible, insane, logical conclusion. If you truly believe that people shouldn't really be running their own affairs, that there should be a nice, big government to take care of everything, why not go communist? That's the solution to everything. We're going to have a dictatorship of the proletariat. We're going to manage all your affairs tidily. You don't like how much businesses charge for things? We're going to have the government set prices. It's working great in Venezuela, where everybody's starving and eating cats and dogs, and school teachers and even doctors are too busy waiting online, or in some cases waiting to wait online, and then getting their fingerprints through a scanner just to be able to buy food, because socialism, it works wonderfully. It works wonders, really. You can take a country that back in the day was enormously productive, whether it's oil in Venezuela or wheat in Russia and the Ukraine, and just reduce it to complete penury. Toward the end of the Cold War, the Soviet Union was deep in debt because it was buying American wheat. Communism, socialism, they truly, truly work. And these days Venezuela, which is oil rich, is having trouble just figuring out the whole gas and oil thing because, well, it can't actually afford to pay for anything, including its own currency. That's right, Venezuela some time ago could not afford to buy its own currency. So all the stuff really works, and so it's no wonder that guys like Bernie Sanders and girls like Elizabeth Warren are very, very eager to try this out in the United States, because this time it's bound to be different. So of course all these little stories about communism and how inspiring the communists were back then begin with, well, they were so inspiring. Now, of course, there were a few minor problems like millions of people dead, well, as Walter Duranty liked to say, you can't make an omelet without smashing some eggs, and you can't make a socialist Soviet dictatorship without murdering millions and millions and millions of people. Sometimes these mistakes happen, mistakes like invading a whole bunch of other countries, allying with Hitler, murdering millions, locking up millions more in gulags, forced psychiatry, torture, terrorism, forced abortions. Mistakes. Mistakes were made. Mistakes constantly keep being made with the left. It just keeps happening, unfortunately. Hillary now is doing her own tour to discuss the mistakes that she made, or rather, the mistakes that we made by not electing her. And, the Soviet Union, it also, mistakes were made. But as articles like When Communism Inspired Americans conclude, yes, there was a problem. It turned out that Stalin had killed a whole bunch of people, and obviously nobody had any idea, except, of course, everybody who wasn't a communist or a communist sympathizer. Everybody else kind of had a bit of an inkling and had been paying attention to this for decades. But yes, Really, though, the important lesson to take away from this for the left is, of course, the inspiration, the original inspiration, not the mistakes that were made, the millions of people that were killed. It's really the whole inspirational aspect of communism. And what's the inspirational aspect of communism? It's totalitarianism. Totalitarianism is just very, very inspiring to the left. And this is where they draw inspiration. And it's not just the Soviet Union. Think about how often during the Obama administration, these people were talking about, China can get a lot of things done. I mean, they can get light rail done. California, that light rail is now on track to cost $75 billion, while absolutely nothing has actually been built. But, if we were in China, they would have built light rail from here to Oakland by now. They would have built light rail from here to Spain by now. I mean, it would have only cost a few million lives and a whole bunch of imaginary money and, 10 million farmers would have had to be evicted, but they would have built it. And nobody would have used it, but they would have built it. And that's really what's so wonderful about socialism. It's what's so wonderful and so inspiring about the left, because they do get things done as long as they have a totalitarian state. And as long as they don't care about how many people get killed, how many people starve, and how many people are just miserable and oppressed, they do get things done. And the left desperately wants to get things done. It got Obamacare done. I mean, it had to break a whole bunch of rules to do it, but it did get Obamacare done. And that was wonderful. I mean, Obamacare doesn't work. It's making a whole bunch of people miserable. Everybody hates Obamacare, but they got it done. That's what counts. The Soviet Union, too, got things done. So for decades, they would insist, yes, Stalin made some mistakes, but he did win World War II. I mean, granted, he had to ally with Hitler, and he caused the collapse effectively of Eastern Europe and gave Hitler a clear path all the way toward the Soviet Union. Then the Soviet Union lost a whole lot of people when Hitler actually invaded the Soviet Union with Stalin's effective complicity. But by the end of the day, the Soviet Union did end up ruling Eastern Europe also. So that's a win. Again, if you don't really care about the consequences or how many people's lives are destroyed, or the fact that this whole system eventually had to collapse of its own momentum, as the left systems always do eventually. But, in the meantime, they did get results. And the left is, of course, very big on results and very big, even more big, on idealism. And that's really the whole message of when communism inspired Americans. Communist ideals, as if the ideals can be detached for the end results, as if the mass murder, the atrocities that occurred under Lenin, occurred under Stalin, went on occurring throughout the miserable, horrible days of the Soviet Union were some sort of unintended consequence. They were some sort of human error. They had absolutely nothing to do with the idealism that articles like When Communism Inspired Americans praise, as if they're exist in two other worlds. On the one hand, there is this world of communist idealism, which is good. On the other hand, there's this world where there were gulags and a whole bunch of people dead. And the two exist in different worlds, and we just have to figure out how to get the communism without all the mass murder. We just have to make it work. It's like getting cigarettes without all the cancer, or getting Fox without all the really horrible comedies. You have to figure out how to make these two things coexist, but somehow they never do, because, of course, it's baked in. Communism kills because communism is a totalitarian ideology of mass murder. That's what it is. That's what it does. It's not an accident. It's not an accidental byproduct. It's not as if, well, this communism was wonderful, but hey, we just looked around and a few million people are dead. We don't really know how this happened. We're going to try this experiment again. And this time we think a few million people are not going to end up dead. And if they do end up dead, we're just going to keep trying it a whole bunch of other times until we get it to work. As Pavlov said about communism, he was not a big fan. If this is supposed to be an experiment, I wouldn't sacrifice a single frog's leg to it. But the left has sacrificed a whole lot more than a single frog's legs. It has sacrificed millions of people, and it's going on sacrificing millions of people to the left. They're doing it across the world, and they're trying to do it in the United States. So we have a very simple question. Are we going to allow these same people who are very, very inspired by communism, an ideology that has been proven factually beyond the measure of a shadow of a doubt, to kill millions of people? Or are we going to just pretend that, well, this time it's bound to work out better? I mean, sure, we're going to have government control, but this time, as Bernie Sanders likes to say, it will be more like Sweden, which means, I guess, we'll be overrun by Muslims who will rape and kill half the indigenous population. There's a very basic reality here. When your ideology kills millions of people, you don't get to try it again. And when you claim to be inspired by it, but you just kind of disavow the nasty side of it, you agree with the nasty side of it. Because if you agree with the ideas, with the so-called idealism of it, you agree with the outcome. We view it that way with Nazi Germany. We don't pretend that, yes, Nazism was going to really, it had some really great ideas. It had some great plans. It had some good ideas about workers and about socialism and environmentalism. But, the way it was implemented was unfortunate. We don't allow Nazis to make those excuses. We should not allow communists and their fellow travelers to make these same excuses. Communism should be unacceptable. And the New York Times excuses of it should also be unacceptable. Thank you very much for listening. This has been another Daniel Greenfield moment. I wish you all a good morning and a good night. And if you want to support the Glazov Gang, subscribe to the YouTube channel. And there will be other moments like this and great broadcasts from Jamie Glazov himself.